Just before we get started, a couple housekeeping. Because of the seating arrangements, we have confession going on over here with Father Edward, and Father Tamaru is over here. So please take advantage of it, but maybe if you know you're going to go to confession, either get in line now or sit towards the end or the edge. Also, with this seating, I know some guys have to scoot a little bit early, just try not to be too disruptive, but we understand. Well, good. Well, this is, we'll go ahead and get started right on time, thanks to John. This is our final 2024 morning of reflection, so we're excited. We had a great lineup. We're super excited. I know this is can be a difficult date, December 20th. It's good for some reasons, it's not as good for others, but we're excited to be here. It's a great way to kind of end Advent and go right into Christmas. And we're super excited about our speaker today. We do have a great lineup for the spring. We'll probably touch on that a little bit at the end. So, get it on your calendars, third Friday of the month. And we're real thankful to the parish and the priest for doing confessions and letting us use this facility today, right before the very busy Christmas lineup. So with that, again, good morning. And I'm just going to say a couple words. We are super excited to have Julie Wilborn with us today. She's showing a lot of courage. She's our very first female or woman speaker to this group. We've been doing this for a long time. And, she's just a phenomenal, we're so happy to have her here this morning. And so I thought I would just take a couple minutes and frame the talk before she got up because, we reflected on this and, I thought, we spend a lot of time, the whole purpose of this event is to create a brotherhood and create accountability and try to be, you're all here, we're kind of preaching to the choir because you're up early here to hear a good message, but we're trying to create a brotherhood and accountability and walk with each other, right? Give feedback. We try to provide examples and support. We don't always do a great job. But as I was reflecting on it, I think we also have a tendency to put up defenses and we try to act like we have it all together and we try to hide our insecurities to our fellow men. We want to act strong, and we do that with women as well, but especially with men. And then we also get a little competitive, right? So it's like, oh, that guy's got it together. I either don't have it together, I'm not gonna let him know, or I got it better than him, right? And so I think that occasionally hearing a different voice is a good thing. And as we thought about it, I think that we have inside of us, we all have that voice that wants us to be a protector, that wants us to be a hero, right? And so today, I think you're going to hear a message that's going to hopefully awaken that hero inside of you, and it's going to spur us on to make a difference in society, in our families, in our culture, and that's really how it's changed, right? It all starts with the family. So I think that you're going to hear a great message today, and I'm just trying to make sure I cover everything here. We also, in the room, don't feel like if you're not a father or your kids are grown, this message is for every man in this room. I mean, we've got priests here, we've got uncles, brothers, fathers. This is a call to action for all men. So I look forward to hearing Julie's talk. Just a couple words on Julie. She's a fantastic speaker. You're too humble to believe that you are, but I know the Holy Spirit's going to speak through you, and you're showing a lot of courage to be here this morning. Julie is a native Atlantan and a graduate of the University of Georgia School of Accounting. She's one of the founders of St. John Bosco Academy, serving as the Director of Finance and Formation since the school's inception in 2009. Her favorite role at the school is actually 9th grade theology. And she and her husband, Rymon, have been married 33 years, have 7 children and 7 grandchildren. So with that, Julie.
Thank you so much. I'm a microphone holder, so if I get too loud, I do that because I speak to kids all the time, and you have to speak really loudly when you're talking to kids in the mornings. When Jeff called me, I obviously speak to crowds a lot, but they're kids, usually. Sometimes I speak to moms, right? That happens a lot. Occasionally married couples, But this is a first. I got to be honest. This is a total first. And when Jeff called me and said, hey, I got an idea to run by you, I was like, that is a terrible idea, actually. I want you to rethink that, pray about it, and like call me back. So if this is terrible, since Jeff insisted that I come in spite of my protest, it's Jeff's fault, actually. Kidding. I'm really humbled, truly, to be here. And when after I got off the phone with Jeff that first time, I did sit down to pray, and several things came into my mind that I know are not from me because I'm not smart enough, that I knew were from the Holy Spirit. And I did want to share those things with you. They're things that I have learned mostly by being an administrator of kids just like yours, or kids just like the ones in your community for the last 15 years. So I'm very honored and privileged and humbled to share those things with you today. I used to think before, if you're not familiar with how St. John Bosco Academy came into being, we were homeschool moms who really wanted to give our kids something better collaboratively, that we knew we could come together and do more than we were able to do individually on our own. And so we came together, and when we started the school, obviously as a mom, I knew the importance of mothers, right? I knew how important that was. And really in education, it kind of feels like, which is our lane is education, it kind of feels like mothers are kind of the end all be all when it comes to education, because they're with the kids all day. They're the ones who do the homework. They're the ones who, right? They sign them up. They do all the things. They get the report cards. But what we have witnessed, what I have witnessed, my personal conversion through this is that as kids get into middle and high school, the pivotal player is dad. The pivotal role is that masculine role in the home. And so that's really what I want to share with you today. I want to share just how pivotal it is, because I don't think I'm going to share anything new with you guys. I think I'm going to bring to light the things that are in the back of your head. That's my goal. I want to share with you what I see are the challenges that you face today that are unique to this culture, to this day and age. And then I'm going to give you some tools, because that's just who I am as a person, to give you the counterattack, right? What we can do about it. So I'm going to talk about how irreplaceable your role as the head of the household is in the community, in your family, in the world at large, and that is really the antidote to everything that ails us as a society. No pressure, no pressure. So just to kind of set the foundation, because I think we can kind of go to sleep at the wheel, and I think it's really important that we don't do that. In 1960, the number one sitcom, the most popular sitcom, was Father Knows Best. I'm going to date myself. Father Knows Best was the real title of the sitcom. Very unpolitically correct for today's day and age, right? And actually, that was the entire plot of the series, right? The entire plot was Bud and Judy would have an issue in the neighborhood, at school, whatever. Mom would have an issue, and Dad always fixed it. He was usually in his very firm chair, smoking a pipe, reading his paper, and it would be like, let's ask Dad. Dad's got the answer. And Dad always had the answer. That literally was the culmination of every single episode. Dad had the answer to everything that was ailing the family, okay? So we went from that in 1960 to the number one sitcom in 1990 was The Simpsons. We had Bart Simpson, truly. And it's kind of funny, but it's actually so scary, because that is the entire platform our kids and our culture have been fed and inundated with. That Dad is not, he doesn't know best. He's not our authority. He's not our leader. He's not the protector. He's not the fixer of all that ails us. He's a buffoon. He's not trustworthy. He's someone we make fun of. He's a moron, right? That is a dangerous message, but it is one we have in fact been inundated with. And while we know intellectually that is not reality, we live in a world where it has seeped in. It has seeped into our neighborhoods. It has seeped into our schools. Our kids have heard it. It's the world we live in. So we have to do something about that. We have to take stock in that. The ripple effect of this very disordered message about who fathers are, who men are in our world, I think it's impossible to overstate the damage that has done. Okay, so patriarchy, actually, which is what I put in the title of my talk, has become a dirty word. I looked it up just to see, like, what does Webster's Online have to say about patriarchy? And it has actually a negative connotation with it. Never mind that patriarchy is what has established the entire Western civilization as responsible for our history as moral beings. Now patriarchy, if you look it up, it gives like this whole, it's kind of gray about men being the leaders and to the exclusion of women. It had to throw that in there. I was like, Webster's, I'm so disappointed. But that's really the connotation that patriarchy has in our world today. And masculinity often has the word what associated with it? Toxic, right? Toxic masculinity. I find that so bizarre in a world where men are more effeminate and weak as a species than they've ever been in human history. Toxic masculinity, yeah, we don't actually have real masculinity in many places anymore. So this is a tragic shift because the male figurehead, the leader of the household, is essential to our survival in a way that nothing else is, okay? And I can say that to you. I'm going to give you some examples of what we've seen at the school. We see this in the school. The kids, so every kid is insecure, right? It's normal. We're humans. We're insecure. Kids are especially insecure. They're groping for an identity. But as they get into middle and high school, I have a gauge that I use. It's like comfortable in their skin is my phrase. Okay. Some kids are very comfortable in their skin. They're insecure, but they hide it well. And at their core, they're really okay with who they are. And then there's varying degrees of that just based on a lot of its personality, a lot of its developmental, a lot of it has to do with what's going on in the home or whatever. But the kids who have a really deep gap in their identity, who are really uncomfortable in their skin, we can see it. It's very visible even when they walk down the hall. And we literally look at each other and be like, call the dad in. Because I can email the mom, I can have a conversation with the mom, and nothing really moves the needle. But we get dad in there and we're like, you got to get in the game. It changes everything. It changes everything. Just by who you are, you change everything for your children. That's a massive burden and privilege, right? So one of my really good examples for this, we had a girl come in 9th grade a few years back. Her father had been injured in an accident and was severely disabled, okay? And so lovely family, very Catholic, beautiful girl. She comes into 9th grade and immediately it's like she's hollow. She's so uncomfortable in her skin. She looks like she's physically in pain, okay? And we're like, gosh, this girl, bless her heart. What inevitably follows with a girl who's like that uncomfortable in her skin is trouble. Like she's gonna get in trouble. She's screaming for help, right? So she gets in trouble, like 1 month in, she does something that most kids at St. John Bosco would not do. And, a couple of seniors come to us and they're like, okay, we got a little problem with one of these new 9th graders. Okay. And we pulled Dad in because it was a big deal. And we're like, okay, she's beautiful. She's objectively beautiful. What's going on at home? And he's like, I have no idea. She hates me. I can't help you. She won't talk to me. And we're like, so what? Like, I don't care if she hates you. Like, push her, pursue her. And my phrase, forgive the crudeness, is pursue the hell out of her. Climb up her butt and pitch a tent and do not let her go. I don't care what she tells you. She's looking for you to define her, right? And so this man, what we could see immediately was he had such shame for his physical deformities. He had such a failure complex that he was afraid of more rejection from his daughter. It was hurting him too, and he was hiding from her, kind of like Adam and Eve in the garden. To Jeff's point, we all have our area of weakness that makes us hide, right? We all have that thing, that Achilles heel that we don't want to come clean with. We're afraid of rejection. It might be anything, right? It's unique to us. But he was so full of self-loathing, it was literally making him hide his face from his own daughter. And she had no identity because it was only going to come from him, right? And I use that example because obviously it was a physical deformity, so we could see it. It was glaring at us. And it was extreme in nature. But I think it applies to all of us, right? It applies to all of us. What area of weakness am I hiding from my kids in or from my family in because I'm afraid of rejection or because I'm afraid I'm not good enough? I think that is a great reflection, and it really was pivotal in my own formation in working with kids. The story did end happily because we kept telling Dad, we don't care. Kids say that. Kids say that. They roll their eyes at you. They tell you you're a moron. We don't care. Pursue her anyway, because there's nothing we can do to even scratch the surface. It's got to come from you. And if it doesn't, what a school does is just an extension of what's already happening in the home if it's a good school, right? At best case scenario, we can only enhance what you're already doing. And so that was a really big deal. For those of you who aren't familiar with Mark Twain's period of growth. He had a journal. I used to call it a diary, and one of my ninth grade boys corrected me. He's like, Mrs. Wilborn, boys don't have diaries, they have journals. Okay. So Mark Twain had a journal, not a diary. His whole life, from like the time he was a teenager, he kept the same journal until he was an adult. And when he was 16 years old, he wrote in his journal, "My father is the stupidest man I have ever known." Okay? This is not unique to you. You are not the only stupid person to ever walk through a teenager's household, right? 21 years old, same journal, a few pages later, Mark Twain wrote, "My father has learned a lot in 5 years." Okay? This is the story of human nature. If you are not, at some point in time in your kid's life, his worst enemy or someone he thinks is really causing an imposition in his life, you're probably not doing it right, right? It's normal. It's perfectly normal. Pursue your kids anyway. Just by definition of who you are, they need your identity to spill over into them. That is where they take their identity from God the Father first. It's from you, okay? Okay, so why? Why is this assault on masculinity, on patriarchy? Why? Because we coasted along for thousands of years with very clearly defined roles between male and female, and you know, the skies were not cloudy all day. We really got that part right for thousands of years. And then in the last 70 years or 80 years, it's been completely flipped. So what's going on? When I was young, a priest said to me, and I still remember it, he said, "Remember, whenever there's a crisis in the culture, the church, by the grace of God, already has told you the answer. She's already told you the answer. You just aren't looking for it yet." And if you look back over the last 100 years, the church has been saying over and over again, warning, warning. As the family goes, so goes society. JP2 wrote extensively and spoke extensively about the family, his encyclical Familiaris Consortio. If you haven't read it, it's amazing. But he talked constantly about the salvation of the world passes by way of the family. The future of the world passes by way of the family. The family is the first and vital cell of society. And then for those of you who are not familiar with Saint Charbel, I'm going to read just a couple of clips from him because he is Lebanese and I'm Lebanese. We love our Lebanese saint. But he wrote, he was a mystic, a hermit, a miracle worker. He had all kinds of miraculous things happen before he even died. And he lived late 1800s, early 1900s. And he wrote extensively and constantly warnings and cautions about the family. And at the time, people were like, "Man, what's going on? Like, you said that before, and things are fine." He was really ahead of his time. He was prophesying what was coming for us. So I'm going to give you just a couple of little quotes from him, just to give you an idea of the magnanimity. "The human family on earth is the image of the Holy Family in heaven. The family passes on the plan of God from one generation to another. The collapse of the family means the collapse of God's plan in humanity. It means the breakup of the message of salvation and sanctity to humanity. The family is the rope that binds humanity together through time and binds generations through history. The family is what gives people their human identity and impresses the image of God in their hearts. The family is the basis of the Lord's plan, and all forces of evil are focusing on destroying the family because they know that by destroying the family, the foundation of the plan of God will be shaken. The war of the evil one against the family is the core of his war against the Lord, because the family is the image of God. Guard your families and keep them from the schemes of the evil one through the presence of God in them. Protect and keep them through prayer and dialogue, through understanding and forgiveness, through honesty, faithfulness, and presence." And he goes on and on. Basically, we're at war, and he predicted it. He knew it was coming. He knew the attack was coming, and for good reason, okay? If I were the devil, and I wanted to destroy what God loves, because that's really what the devil hates isn't God, because he's in awe of God. He hates what God loves, which is us. So if I'm the devil and I want to bring down civilization, what am I going to strike first? The platoon leader, right? We're at war. The family is the platoon. I say this to the kids all the time. Your family's your platoon. Hold up your family. Defend them at all costs. But if I'm the devil and I've got one silver bullet to shoot, I'm going to take out the platoon leader, right? Because I get the whole family in one fell swoop if I can just take out the platoon leader. It's a brilliant strategy, and it almost worked. It's done a lot of damage. We've seen it. We have witnessed it. We're witnessing it now. And so what can we do about that? Let's talk about that. You're at war, and I think just being aware that you're at war, and if you get up on many days, because this marathon is a long life. It's a marathon, not a sprint. We say that to families all the time. It's a marathon. It's a marathon. Your kid is not going to get up and just miraculously at 10 years old be like, you guys are brilliant. I want to do everything you say. How can I serve you? How can I love you better? That's not, I mean, we want that so badly, but it's not reality, right? It's designed to make us holy in the process by our perseverance, and it is a marathon. But my message to you is, if you find that it's hard, it's not because your kids are evil or you're a failure. It's because you're at war. Persevere. Put your head up, dig in, and fall on the sword again and again for your family, and you will never be sorry. It is a marathon. Don't get tired. What you're doing here is amazing. This is exactly what you have to do. You have to hold each other up, hold each other accountable, give each other that support, because we can't do this alone. All right, there are 3 things in particular that make this war extra hard right now. 3 things in our culture that make it really hard. One is we live in a secular society, okay? My gold standard, my students will tell you, is Charles Ingalls, the Little House on the Prairie. That was ordered. Everything, not everything, but a lot of things were easy because they lived in a completely ordered society, okay? Charles Ingalls did not have to have meetings like this for how to help get his kids to heaven. They could get up every day and just follow what the culture was doing, because morality was expected, and you were rejected if you weren't moral, right? A baseline goodness and actually striving for morality was required, okay? So you could send your kids to school and they could follow the herd and they were gonna do really well because everybody had a same baseline mentality. The secularization of our world has really turned that on its head, right? We can't do that anymore, right? It requires us to be countercultural, and that is really hard. It's very uncomfortable. It's not innate to our nature, right? Because we have a desire as humans to be accepted. It's part of survival. We have a desire to be accepted by the herd. Well, what happens when the herd is going off the cliff? Well, you gotta find a different herd. I'll never forget when we were exclusively homeschooling initially, and my daughter, my oldest, is very choleric. She's very strong-willed, very articulate. She is 8 years old, and she is standing looking out the window, the front window, like on one of my not-so-shining moment days as a mom. It's like probably mayhem in my house, and we haven't even started homeschooling yet. And I think the bus is now dropping kids off in the cul-de-sac. And she's like, everybody gets on the bus. Everybody. I'm like, yeah, so what? Not us. She's like, we're weird. We are weird. I'm like, we are not weird. They're weird. We're normal. We're just normal by ourselves, right? And I was like, this is going to be really hard, because she's only 8 years old and she already knows we're not one of many. And we really are hardwired to be that. So it's hard. You are going to have to come alongside your kids from a very young age and say, we're not the Joneses. We're not keeping up with the Joneses, because we are the Joneses, okay? And that's okay. Don't come to me and tell me that Johnny and Peter and Susie all have phones and you're the only one in the class. Your kids are going to tell you a lie. They are the only kid in the entire school that doesn't have a phone. It's a lie. Half the kids don't have phones, but they're all going home and telling their parents, I'm the only one, and I am ostracized for it. It's not true. They're normal for it, okay? Make sure your kids know that being countercultural is now a necessity to get to heaven, okay? It's now a necessity. My example for how far we've slid, just because the frame of reference helps us all to understand the distance we've come. Frank Sinatra in 1955-60, in his heyday, he was canceled by MGM because he had an affair. Okay, so he talked his wife into not divorcing him so he could keep his record contract with MGM. Can you imagine such a day when you were not accepted even in Hollywood? Holy cow, we have really come a long way, right, in the wrong direction, okay? All right, so that's number one. We can't go with the flow. We have to be countercultural, and it hurts. Number two, we have a pervasive epidemic of busyness. Busyness. Another brilliant tactic of the devil is to dangle a million very good things in front of us that our kids have or have to be or have to do in order to be well-rounded. There's a lot of screaming pressure at us, okay? And I used to think it's good enough for us to just like get all the big decisions right as a family and the little things will take care of themselves. I don't think that anymore. I think you have to be very discerning and intentional about every little decision you make because we give our lives away in like 500 small decisions. And they're usually not about really big evil things. They're about objectively good things. Travel sports, APs, all of the things that we have to have that we sign up for. And those things, the trouble is they're objectively good. But when something objectively good is crowding out a greater good, then you have disorder. Okay? Remember that the greatest gift you have to give to your kids is your influence. And you will hand that off in very little, seemingly insignificant decisions where you give your sphere of influence away. Do not do that. Do not abdicate your influence. Okay? It's really, truly one of the greatest things you can give your kids. Control the narrative in your home. I had a priest say once, when my kids were small, and it really stuck with me. He said, the storyteller wins the day. Whoever controls the narrative in your home is the one that your kids will follow. Make sure that you control the narrative in your home. Make sure you don't give that away to someone else because you may not like how they turn out, right? Control the narrative in your home. Be the storyteller. There are a lot of dangers with it. I don't have my phone up here, but the other big problem that we face today is the media and phones. Because even when your kids are under your roof, they're not really with you, right? They're still being influenced. You're not controlling the narrative as long as they have a phone in their back pocket, okay? That is a reality that we have to face. We are abdicating our authority, our influence with phones, with time, with all of these things that really at face value, they're not evil, and that's the big dilemma. You have to be really discerning. Okay, what can we do? The counterattack. And I want to use one more example from the school just to give you a kind of a glimpse of how much just not so much what you can do or what you can say, but who you are is what changes the face of the planet in your family and in your community. When we started our school, it was obviously all homeschool moms, okay? We started with pre-K through 8, and then we added a high school. And so we just kind of motored along, same women. Now we've got a high school, and it was a disaster. It was a disaster. We were up against these really strong, awesome young men who were being men, who were pushing back. You've got an 11th grade, 6'3", amazing football player who's sitting across the table, who's gotten into trouble, and he's got 3 women looking at him going, all right, buddy, we're going to have to call you to a higher plane. Okay, that fell completely on its face, right? That is absolutely not going to work. And I was like, Lord, you have to do something here because we can't form men. We can't. We're women. We can't do that. It's not my role. I don't want it. You're going to have to send somebody to this little hybrid school if you want us to churn out holy young men and women because masculinity sets the tone for the entire place. So enter Chad Lange. I don't know how many of you are familiar with him. A great man. He walks in about 6 months after I said that prayer, and he's like, I need a place for my family. I've been an athletic director for the last 18 years in Gwinnett County Schools. I'm ready for something else. And we were like, oh, hallelujah, right? So he comes in the door. He is there for a week, and he says, I just really don't want an office. I want a hall cart because I need to be with the kids. If I'm going to do what you're asking me to do, I just need to be with the kids. So that man is in the hallway for one day, and the entire culture shifted 180 degrees. And he is a great man, and he is really funny, and he is really good at a lot of things. But it wasn't so much about what he did or what he said. It was standing there with eyeballs, being present. He shifted the entire culture of our school. And so my daughter, who was actually working at the school at the time, she's like, Mom, does that upset you? I mean, you laid down your life for the school, and then in walks a man. And he just runs away with the entire culture of the high school in ways that you guys were dying over for the last 2 years. I was like, absolutely not. I am thrilled because God made that. That is God's design. I don't want that job anyway. I've got things I can do well. I am so grateful that it's innate to him And God created that. And God makes the most amazing things. And I can stand there and watch the kids just stand taller because Chad Launch is in the hallway. And it elevated everybody's dignity because you elevate the boys' dignity. And what did the girls do? Oh, well, now being trashy isn't cool. Now we're going to be good. You know, it elevated everybody's dignity because we had a man in the hallway. I am so countercultural. That will get me on the 5 o'clock news if anybody recorded that, right? I'm so happy and grateful to God for that gift. Since then, we've brought in another amazing strong man, and that's what builds culture. But I say that example to you because that's what you are in your home. It's not that you have the perfect words. It's not that you do all the right things. It's who you are. It's who God made you to be that changes the culture of your home. So when you're there, be there and be present and be eyeballs and invest yourself in those relationships with your kids, even if you feel like you're stupid, right? Because we all feel like that on a lot of days. But it doesn't matter. It's by virtue of who God made you that you will rescue your home and your community. All right, so what can we do? Just to go over my top couple of things. Remember, the greatest thing you have to give to your kids is the gift of your influence, not your money. There's almost an epidemic of women do all the things with the home and the kids, and men are the paycheck. And that is a disaster, okay? That's a disaster. Get in the game. Get in the game. We've been crowding men out with our desire to control stuff. Don't let that happen in your homes. Don't be so busy. You're so much more than the paycheck, right? A nice house is awesome. Great trips are awesome. Elite sports are awesome. And a great education is awesome. But the war is won with you being present to your kids. That's where that bond has to be built from 2 to 22 and beyond, right? Remember that God does not call the qualified. He qualifies the called. Our entire church, our history is full of weak men and women who have become saints by the grace of God and because he gave them the grace when they needed it. And they were all failures in the beginning, right? That's all any of us are, broken humans. God needs men who are willing, not able, right? Just be willing. Fall on the sword. It may look like a train wreck, but you're doing it. Stay in the game. Don't be afraid of conflict. This is a big thing. Number 3, don't be afraid of conflict. I think there's like this epidemic of kumbaya, where as long as there's peace in my home, we're winning. And that is the furthest thing from the truth. There's a time and a place for war, right? There's a time and a place for you to show your kids. And actually, you show your kids by what you're willing to fight for, what you're willing to get ugly over. They'll know what's important to you, what your priorities really are, by what things you're willing to have a fight with them over. And my example is when I was 19 years old, I was actually 18. I had my first semester at University of Georgia, and I actually went to Mass the whole time. But I came home for Christmas break, and New Year's Eve, all my classmates and I from high school got together. We stayed up till 5 in the morning. I come in at 5 in the morning, like halfway zombie. And this is when there was only one Mass. It was at 10 a.m. at our local church. And my dad comes in at 9. He's like, hey, get up for Mass. And I laugh because the Solemnity of Mary, Mother of God is like the church's way of keeping us really well-behaved for New Year's Eve, right? Because you're going to have to get up and go to Mass. So keep it clean, right? So my dad is like, get up, we're going to Mass. And I'm like, please. I was not a lovely person earlier in my days. It's like, you've got to be kidding me. Like, I was out till 5 in the morning. I don't know if you know that. And he's like, oh, that is super interesting. Get in the car. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, I am in college. You cannot treat me like a child. He's like, also super interesting. Get in the car. And he's like, I'm paying for your school. Get in the car. And I kept pushing back, and I was like, oh my God, I cannot believe you're going to try to control me. Like, I had really felt that freedom of being at school, and was so miffed that my dad thought he could tell me to go to Mass when I had had no sleep. And he said, look, this is really entirely your call. It can get ugly, or it can go smoothly for you this morning. And I'm down for either one, but that part is your call. Like, you are going to Mass. I can either throw you over my shoulder, put you in the car myself in your pajamas, Father will not care, or you can get up, get dressed, and we can have a peaceful day. But that's totally your call, but you are going to Mass. And I was like, oh my gosh, I hate you. I did the thing. I did the most like how you manipulate people through loss of love, right? And that's actually the antithesis to love. It's the counterfeit to love, is I remove my love because you're not giving me what I want, right? I hate you. And my dad said, oh, that's okay. I love you enough for you to hate me. This is not a popularity contest. This is about you and your betterment, not about me. Best thing he could have ever said, okay? He was unflapped, unwavering, but he was actually willing to kick my fanny and put me in the car. So I learned 2 really important things that day at 18, and here I am 35 years later telling you about them, that stuck with me forever, obviously. And that is that my dad's God was real, that he was willing to fight for him, and that he didn't care about anything else, okay? That's a big deal. Those are great lessons to teach your kids. Be good for the fight when it comes to God. Let them know that that's one thing that is a non-negotiable in your world, right? Because you love their soul enough that you don't care if they hate you. That's because it's not a popularity contest. He was exactly right, okay? Okay, so don't be afraid of conflict. Peace at all costs is just not the goal. And unfortunately, Christ came to resolve conflict. He came for conflict resolution, not avoidance at all costs, right? We have the graces of the church, and we can resolve conflicts. We get past those as a family, but don't be afraid of conflict. Again, teach your kids by example to be countercultural. Remind them they're going to have to be if they want to go to heaven, because the world is not heading in the right direction anymore. Have that conversation, have it young, have it often, and point out examples of that. Okay, this is an example of the world going to hell in a handbasket. It's trouble, but we're going to move this way, and I'm in it with you. I am in that cold water with you. It hurts, but you're not alone, right? Fortify your home with grace. Fortify your home with grace. Obviously, you know this. But I just want to tell you, when my husband and I were young parents, and we were like petrified. My husband was in medical school. We were dirt poor. We didn't know what we were doing. We were very young. And so we just basically followed all these older, successful families around that we knew, that we had come across. And we were like, what did you do? What did you do? How did you keep your kids in the church? Some of them had vocations. All of them had solid kids. And we were like, we're just going to make notes. And every single time, we were like making a list. It had one thing on it. Every single time they said the same thing. You know what? We did a lot of things poorly. We know we did. But one thing we did well, we prayed the rosary every single day of our lives. We did not miss a day. And we were committed to it. And that's the only thing I can point to that I think made the difference. Every one of them said the same thing. They went to Mass. They never missed a day of the rosary. So you will fortify your home with her protection, with Our Lady's protection when you pray the rosary and are committed to it. It will change the landscape. It will change the trajectory for your family. And you will see it over years. I will give you $1 million if it doesn't. I promise you, you will be mind blown when you see what happens over years. You'll look back and be like, that completely changed the landscape of my family. So remember, you are building a cathedral. It's a 100-year process. But make the decisions today that in 100 years from now, and you're dead and gone, your legacy will scream, he was faithful. He was faithful. He was a man. He was present. And he changed the course of eternity for our entire family name, right? You will do that just by who you are and being faithful. So thank you so much for having me here today. I do have a few questions for reflection that I think at this time of year, it's like the best time to take stock. If anyone has any questions for me, again, I'm humbled and I probably don't have the answer, but you're welcome to throw it out at me and I'll do the best I can. But in the meantime, the men are going to pass out questions for reflection, and it's really a personal thing. Yes.
Thank you so much. That was a great, fantastic talk.
Thank you.
Where were you 20 years ago? For the guys who have gray hair in this audience.
Where was I 20 years ago?
Yeah, and we would love. This is probably the most refreshing talk I can speak for all of us that we've heard on just kind of the broad strokes of how to raise a family. And
thank you.
So thank you very much. We do want to hear a little bit about John Bosco, though, too. Maybe some more in terms of where you guys are and where you're going and what the challenges are and how we can help.
Oh, that's awesome. So St. John Bosco is, how many of you are familiar with it? At least a little bit? Okay. We are a hybrid school. We started around kitchen tables in mine and my sister's homes and evolved to, we have just under 600 students now and are opening our second campus in fall of 2025. It's been a total work of God. Again, I'm humbled to be part of it, but it's really all a work of God. And what we have seen in that is that family time matters. That the best thing that we have to give as a school is, because we're hybrid, we bring you guys back into the equation because your kids are home. And remember that the salvific unit of a soul isn't a great school. It's not a great sports program. The salvific unit of a soul is a family. So the best thing we can do to rebuild civilization is to restore family time. So whatever, and I'm not here to advertise the school at all to you, because wherever you are is where God wants you. But wherever you are, make a point to be intentional with your time to rebuild family life, to set aside time for it, because it is disintegrating. It is disintegrating. It's a crisis. Anyone else?
My father said this when I was very young, and he said, straighten out the tree when it's young.
He was a very wise man.
So, I mean, that stood with me, and it continues, so I just wanted to share that with the group.
My example of that, just the tree example, is great. My analogy is, children are clay. When they're born, they're clay. They're soft, they're malleable. And what does clay do over time? It hardens, of course. That's exactly what happens to humans. We don't harden, but we become less formable the older we get, right? So, and we work on this with our parents all the time. Like, if you want a holy, well-formed 20-year-old, don't start at 18, right? Start at 2, right? Start at 2. There are things that we do constantly to help kids become selfless and self-mastered and virtuous that has to start here. And that they don't become self-mastered there, but they hear it. And it actually becomes part of their being, even hearing it, right? And then when they're facing that as they're older, it's in there. It's in there. They know that right thing, and they've been working against themselves their whole lives, and it's there. That habitual desire to do good is in there, right? But it has to start when they're small. So your dad was very wise. Yes. They see what you do, not what they say. So true. Model the behaviors that you want for your kids to have.
I have a question. So this is actually the first time I've been to Men's Morning Reflection. So I know this might be a kind of like a big question. I know you mentioned about masculinity and being the platoon leader of the home. And this might be something that Men's Morning Reflection might have covered and I just haven't heard. What would be the attributes or the qualities that you would say is masculinity in the home? Because that was kind of something that I've tried to read books about and things like that, because I have 4 boys at home that they look at me as a leader. What would qualities that you would say is masculinity in a home?
So that's actually a great question. So the main 3 are lead, provide, protect, right? And the virtues that flow from those. So the strength, fortitude, perseverance, self-control, all of those, the strong virtues. Obviously, your wife's going to model those too, but there's a way that you do it in your masculinity, the toughness, that really strong spine, right? Men doing the man jobs, as seemingly insignificant as that is, having those defined roles, those beautifully defined roles where women are more nurturing and men are naturally tougher, and for good reason, right? You're not as emotional. So not being as emotional, being calmer, not being, as women, our hearts are more tender. We tend to overreact to certain things, and men are that stable force. And in marriages where that's happening, it's really beautiful. That spills over onto the kids, and they have that bedrock from the father who's that stable force, just like Father knows best, right? Does that kind of answer your questions? Yeah, living those beautifully, traditionally defined roles is just a great place to start,
We've got a question from John, but because I have the microphone, I'm going to make a comment real quick. I think I get to do that. I get to do that. He doesn't ever let me have the microphone, just to be clear. You mentioned the masculinity traits, and in your talk you mentioned the fighting or the being okay with conflict. Mm-hmm. And I do think it is we're we want peace. We have so much like battle during the day, and we get home and you do not, and we have a tendency to, I find, kind of like, okay, what is mom? Is she, what do we do? Okay, let's just kind of like, okay. And I mean, it's really hard to come in like, I'm going to disrupt things, right? And I think what you said is knowing when you've got to like disrupt things. So anyway.
There's a time and a place for that. And also, this is important because if your relationship does not have enough tenacity to take the withdrawal, we talk a lot about this, the relationships, whether with your kids, with your coworkers, with your wife, relationships all are like a bank. They're like a bank where you have deposits and withdrawals. And with your kids, the beautiful thing is you can make withdrawals because you're constantly making deposits. And as they get older, if you don't keep making those deposits because you're never with them or you're not tuned into the things they're doing really well, then it becomes very combative when you go to make a withdrawal, right? And we do have to make those withdrawals as parents. And I often tell the parents at our school, please don't make me make all the withdrawals at school because I don't have the opportunities to make the deposits that you do, right? I'm happy to do that, but I'd rather not because I'm constantly trying to lead your kids to heaven at school. That would be my preference rather than making withdrawals. So formation is one of those delicate balances of knowing, and my dad could do that day that we had the big fight because my dad was always there. He was always there with us, right? So thank you for pointing that out. It was an oversight. Yes?
Sometimes I'm on the opposite end of that, Jeff, where I bring my stress home from work, come in the door, guns blazing, looking for a fight. So how important, sometimes the culture will tell us like humility and reconciliation is toxic masculinity. But I think, how important is that concept in the home to lead from the masculine, platoon leader perspective, from humility and reconciliation?
Well, I do think that they go hand in hand. So you can have that conflict with humility. You can say, look, this is really important and we're gonna go toe to toe over it, but I love you and we're gonna come full circle with it. But let's have it out. My suggestion to you, because I know how men are when they're at work and they come home and they're exhausted, don't have those conversations right then, unless it's a behavior that you just saw in a small child that you have to address, which can usually be done pretty simply. If you've got to have a big ugly conversation, save it for a Saturday morning. Save it for let's go to lunch. Let's have it. Do it at a different time than when you're at your worst. That's okay. That's totally fine. Does that make sense?
Okay, we got one more.
Okay.
And John's.
Sorry, John. There's a hand back there too. Sorry.
So I had a question. I grew up homeschooled my entire life, and my wife grew up Northeast. Her mother's in public school systems and things like that. And so there's this big, and nothing is, she would agree with this comment. I work with Jeff, and he's been dribbling St. John's Bosco me for years, how great it is and all this stuff. Where do you see, a lot of times, even in our today's culture, homeschool is like, you're a weirdo. Like, I mean, you're at home, like you were saying with your 8-year-old. My wife always gives me a hard time about it. The hybrid is an easier approach, but even that's a little bit extremely countercultural. Yeah. How do you break the norm of like, and maybe you're just not even trying to break the norm, but the connotation of that's just weird. Like, hybrid, homeschool, like why would you, I heard a guy the other day in my neighborhood say something which caused me to cringe. He said, a lot of my wife thinks of school as a dry cleaners. Drop the kids off, clean them up, make them really nice, and send them back. And I was like, that is terrible, first of all. But how do you, I guess, battle that kind of mindset of that?
With utter confidence, we just don't care. And when you have enough people, and this is why we came together and by the grace of God started this community. When you have enough people in your boat who are like so cool, you so don't care. And our kids don't care. Our kids will literally go out into the world after they graduate. And they're like, yeah, we were at the University of Georgia. There were a bunch of drunk people at parties. They looked like idiots, and we so don't care. We're going to go over here. They know how to have good, clean fun. They are normal, and they are holy and good. And that's really the balance that we have to strike. And that's a conversation that you have to have with your kids from the beginning. And my neighbors do. I mean, in fairness, my neighbors thought I was the freaky woman, like the old woman in the shoe who had no children. So many children, she didn't know what to do. That was me up on the hill in my house. But now that I have what they view is that was the family life we were going for, and it didn't end that way. So I would say, like, if you're just starting, begin with the end in mind and look at what you have to do to get the end goal. And you do have to be countercultural, because if you just check the boxes and follow the herd, you're going to get what the herd is getting. And you can take stock in that by looking out and seeing what's in the culture.
Hey, so I have a question. I feel like I'm good at being a man. I very much understand it. I have 4 boys. A lot of what you say, guns blazing, or I'm fine telling my kids, the day I had was horrible, but it's no big deal. I still don't understand women to this point. I don't understand my wife. I don't know how I got married. I have no advice to give my 4 boys for women. So based on your view of kids growing up through high school, how would you, if you were a man, how would you give advice to your boys, as they grow up? That's my question. About women specific.
About women. Okay. All right. Wow. Stretching me this morning. I haven't even finished my cup of coffee yet. So here's the thing about women. They're everything that you're not. They're breakable. They're fragile. They're soft. They're emotional. They care about things that you don't necessarily think are important. And they are looking for you to be strong for them. Okay? I do see a lot of women who are afraid their husbands aren't strong enough, or maybe their husbands have shown that they're not strong enough, and they take over. It's a really dangerous thing. They start to take over. And once a husband feels like the woman doesn't have confidence, he backs away. He backs away even more. So then the vicious cycle is in play. So keep telling them to be strong, but strength and love, right? Strength and love. That's what women need. We want to be loved. We want to be seen. We want to be loved. I mean, it's crazy, you guys. The 10th grade girls, I was their chaperone for the March for Life last year, and I love to do this, like where we all climb in a bed together and we're all sitting there. This is so, again, not politically correct. We're all sitting there in my room in the bed, and we're like, all right, tell me like all your deepest thoughts. And they're like, well, this is Wilborn. You know what I think about every day is the names of my kids. I have a list right here. Do you want to see it? I mean, they're in 10th grade, and they're ordered, they're normal, they're healthy, and they want to be loved so badly. They want to know who their husband is. They want to know when their vocation can start. So they are so feminine. That's what women are. And men are not. Men are like, woo, let's go conquer the world. Where am I? What next thing can I do? And women just want to be loved. So I think that would be the best information I could give my sons. And that's what I do tell my sons. Like, care for these beautiful wives you have. Be tender. Be tender with them, and then command their respect by your strong leadership.
So I'll wrap up the questions just real quickly. Julie, how do you recommend, and as the children leave the nest, so to speak, as they go out into college and so on and so forth, what is the role of the father and mother, and how does that change for them?
That is such a hugely important question. So we have this also tendency in society to be like, well, he's 18, he's done. No, they are not done at 18. They still actually have half a brain. The only thing that changes is the landscape is a little bit harder because they're moving out of your house, probably, right? Not necessarily. But maintain, I mean, it just becomes harder. My view of 18 to 25, depending on where my kids go to school, is it can just be harder because you still have to maintain a very close relationship because now he's not under your roof. Now your sphere of influence is really stretched. It might be at, University of Georgia. If they don't go to Catholic college, you have to be very present because they are fighting a battle. My son actually summarized it when he went to Georgia from Pinecrest Academy. He got to Georgia, and one weekend he's like, wow, okay, so you provided Jesus for me everywhere, and I didn't even notice he was everywhere, and now he is nowhere. And I am like, there's like a massive void in my soul right now, and I'm a little bit scared. I was like, well, that's awesome that you're actually able to say that, but you have to do things now to fill that, to be constantly filling that. And he's like, it's actually a lot of work that I wasn't anticipating. But that's a summary of the world out there. They will be sold lies as truth. And tell your kids. And I told my son, I went to Georgia. I was like, you will be told lies as truth and truth as lies. And they will tell you lies and tell you that those are completely true. They print lies in books all the time. If you think you're being lied to, give us a call and let's talk about it. That's a great thing to tell kids. Again, the one who tells the story first wins. So he went suspicious. Please send your kids into the world suspicious. Okay? Eyes wide open. that the world is out to get you and out to undermine everything we've taught you. I know it sounds paranoid. It's not. It's just true, right? The church, we have the church behind us. We're not afraid, but we are eyes wide open.
So Julie, thank you. That was fantastic. And